Obviously, I teach hip-hop courses. I teach writing about hip-hop culture, critical approaches to hip-hop culture, literary approaches to hip-hop culture, the sociology of hip-hop culture. I teach a wide range of courses that use the texts of hip-hop studies to explore all the different nuances and complexities of what we refer to as hip-hop. Now, what I often like to say to folk is, I teach that, but even if I were teaching Chaucer or Edgar Allan Poe or Shakespeare, I would still be a hip-hop scholar, because hip-hop culture has shaped my pedagogical aesthetics, like the way that what I think about being, what I think of as being beautiful or preferable in terms of how I teach, has to do with hip-hop culture. So I like to sample different things when I teach. You know, I love the oratory and the verbal energy in the classroom, so I like try to facilitate discussions. I love battling back and forth between the students in a competitive sense in terms of class discourse. So I have a hip hop sort of form to the way that I teach. But obviously, yes, I also do teach a lot of content along those lines as well. So I'm a hip hop scholar in form and content. I am James Braxton Peterson, and I am hip hop. I realized that I wanted to become a professor by having a conversation with a professor of mine by the name of Ed Hill. And this was late in my collegiate career. I was an undergrad at Duke, and I had an office hour meeting with a professor. Ed Hill has since passed away. But during that conversation, Ed Hill asked me, like, what are you going to do with your life, boy? And I said, I'm going to go to law school. I want to be some kind of lawyer. I didn't have a really well-defined sense of exactly what I wanted to do. I just was on that law school track, right? And he was like, well, why do you want to become a lawyer? I couldn't answer that. You know, what do you know about the field of law? I couldn't answer that. He was like, well, you know, have you ever considered a job or a profession in the academy? And I honestly didn't even know what he was talking about when he said that. And he then had to explain to me, have you ever thought about being a professor? And I had to answer honestly and say no. And he set up this story for me that was just an amazing story, and I still remember it to this day. He was like, look, I think that you're very talented. I've seen you in class discussions. You're engaged. You drive class discussions sometimes. You're just great in that classroom space, and I think you make a great professor. But just because you're going to have to make a decision between these two professions, let me just tell you about me and my sister. So he and his sister are around the same age. He went to grad school at the same time. She went to law school. Or however it worked out, they came out around the same time. And she was kind of at a second-tier law school. And when they came out, he got his job and she got her job. And he said, he gave me what their salaries were. Her salary was a little bit lower than his starting out. But that wasn't the deal breaker for me. What he said was, he was like, look, my sister works about 80 hours a week. He said, me, I work 12 hours a week. I have every vacation. I have summers off. Summers off. Right? And he's like, I'm still doing work during those times, but it's my work. It's my own personal work, and I'm doing the things that I want to do. And that was such an amazing way to put it to me, and not that I was lazy, but just to conceptualize it around autonomy, like personal autonomy and quality of life. It was so appealing to me at that particular time that I went home and threw out all my LSAT stuff. I threw out all the law school stuff. Wow. And ordered up and started getting all the GRE stuff and prepared to go to grad school.
It's very rare that you can find someone that inspires you so much to get you off your very plane of thinking, and you're very,
It transformed me in that moment. It transformed me in that.
That's the sound of the police. That's the sound of the beast.
Even before Professor Hill, KRS-One had a real deep impact on me. In fact, KRS-One was the first figure to put teaching into my head as like an important thing to consider. Even though I didn't consider being a teacher until I was in college, KRS-One always just kind of, for me, showed me that intellectualism was cool. And no other artist had more impact or persuasion on my way of thinking than he did. Remake of the Malcolm X Pose at the Window, that's one of the most classic album covers, and maybe his best album, by the way, by all means necessary. And again, the fusion of poetics and sort of gangster mentality with intellectualism, and without all the consumerism and misogyny and other things that go along with those things sometimes.
Right.
So,
which is the prevalent, you know, focus of hip hop nowadays.
It sure is. It sure is. So hip hop was really different then, and I have to credit KRS-One for sure.
Now, are you familiar with O'Henny's take on hip hop?
I am. You know, he's given me some teasers on it. I understand it in its essence, which is to think about hip hop in its most intellectualized progression. Right. So for O'Henny, and O'Henny has been here for a while. I think it's taken him some time to develop the philosophy behind it and really flesh it out in his mind, and he's a very careful thinker, so I think he wanted to take the time to do that. But if you listen to Rapidemics, which I think is just one of the greatest hip-hop albums ever made, that's one of O'Henny's earlier albums, you can already see that O'Henny is constrained by the forms of rap music. So he's already looking at like cubism and trying to do surreal stuff and thinking about Baroque rhythmic methods and classical music as a form for rap. And so he's already wrestling with all of those things, meanwhile addressing all kinds of socio-political issues behind some hot beats.
Right.
So that's all there in Rapidemics. I think what's happening with hip-hop is, as O'Henny is maturing intellectually, he's understanding that the limitations of hip-hop culture are they're kind of like false limitations, right? So the limitations that we see on the music have everything to do with the industry, nothing with the music. The limitations that we see in terms of the content of the lyrics, like the misogyny and the consumerism and things of that nature, has nothing to do with the form itself. That just has to do with the industry and our limited perceptions of how far the music can go. And so through hip-hop, O'Henny is pressing all of us to infuse hip-hop culture with some intellectualism,
right?
And really to infuse it with, you know, the highest level of creativity that can be brought to bear on the form. And so for him, that has to do with, you know, rhyme styles that step outside of the confines of 4/4 beat measures and step outside of the confines of nursery rhyme, A B stylings. He's really wants to push the form beyond that. And because we know it's a form, I know that he can do that.
That's incredible.